Great. Welcome all, and thank you all for investing your time with us today. More importantly, thank you for investing your stories and experiences so that our audience can really formulate some great questions and then start to build their thought process and go down the experience and journey that you folks have already done so. So in the session today, you as experts, industry experts, will discuss how to go about effectively evaluating, piloting, and deploying AR, VR, and wearable technology solutions. We'll be covering questions like, what steps do I need to take to successfully introduce and adopt an AR and VR as well as wearables into my business? But before we get started, I'd like to introduce our esteemed panel. So I'm going to call each one of you out individually, and we'll start with you, Max, if you would introduce yourself and provide a short background.
Sure. So my name is Max Sikorski. I work at Volvo Trucks North America, and I'm the key user here for VR, AR, XR, and animations. I've been working with this technology for about 3 years with the primary focus of driving VR and now AR into engineering use, so everyday use in engineering.
Fantastic. And how about David?
David Redding. I'm with Schlumberger. So we're an oil field service company, and very similar. So over the last 3 years, we started to look at different applications around virtual reality, some augmented reality, and as well as assisted reality. We've had some fantastic results that I'm excited to share with everyone. And yeah, well, glad to be here.
Oh, fantastic. And thank you. We're looking forward to hearing about those experiences. Peggy, how about you?
Hi, Rob. I'm Peggy Gulick. I work with AGCO Corporation globally. So I'm director in digital transformation, really focused on our operations and our enterprise internal. So corporate office is in Duluth, Georgia. I actually am sitting in our plant in Jackson, Minnesota, and happy to talk about all 53 innovative plants today as we get into AR and VR.
Oh, fantastic. Thank you, Peggy. And Lonnie, how about yourself?
Hey, Rob. Lonnie Ludwig, Vice President of Solution Services at CBT. I work with Rob. My team's responsible for deploying AR, VR type solutions. We tagline it Connected Worker. So I've been in the IT industry for almost 30 years, and over the last 5 years, we've had a intense focus on digital transformation and industrial IoT and wearable compute, wearable technology, AR, VR deployments have been part and parcel of that.
Wonderful. Thanks, Lonnie. And my name is Rob Schaeffer. I'm the president of CBT, and I will be the monitor for our session today. So let's jump in. And so, I think probably everybody that hasn't begun the journey is starting to think, how do I get started? What are the steps? What do I need to be thinking about? Who do I need to be enlisting in terms of support? So, Max, let's start with you and say, what kind of objectives did you set for in the beginning, and talk a little bit about the challenges that you faced to get the projects off the ground?
Sure. So at the very beginning, we started at absolutely nothing, just an idea of, hey, maybe we could use virtual reality to help with engineering. And as we worked through it, we came up with a few things that were just critical to getting this off the ground. The first, and I think the most important one, is having passionate key users. So if you just assign someone to work on VR and say, hey, get VR into projects, you've probably got a 20/80 shot of that person actually turning out to be the person who's going to drive this into your system. And also, you got to work on something measurable. So for us, it started off with how many issues can we find in VR and how do we tie that to value? And eventually that led to how can we start replacing things with virtual reality? So using those two things, we've managed to expand our key user network to all of our sites around the world. And we have at least one passionate key user at each site who's willing to put in that extra effort, because the systems aren't always going to work. Things are going to break, new hardware and new software all the time. So it's important to have someone who's willing to stick with it.
Yeah, great. Thanks for that insight. And David, that's really a good segue is, kind of how did you identify the entry point for IIoT solutions, and what were the upfront metrics that you and your company or teammates set at the beginning and the outset of the project?
Well, for us, fortunately, we had a large deployment of handheld devices, so iPads and iPhones, which really gave us kind of a more of a natural segue into kind of the wearable front, right? And when we started this, we were trying to really go after efficiency. How can we take what someone does today on a tablet and continue to push that envelope of can they do their job faster, but then also more effective, with higher service quality, but then again, taking less time. So as far as the baseline goes for us, we really had some great starting points, as a starting point to get in, and then we can spread that out through the organization and say, even if you don't have handhelds, now you're seeing the value that wearables are being hands-free brings to the market, right? Safety, efficiency, and not skipping those steps, because then you have everything that you want to do right in your field of view. So it was kind of the natural segue into this market.
Yeah, that's terrific. And that really speaks to some of the challenges when you have to bring in both the IT side of the world and converge that with OT. Peggy, how did you break down those functional challenges and barriers between OT and IT?
Yeah, so that's a great question. The role I play actually is the buffer between OT and IT. So the job I came into really had the lean department of engineers and then the IT technicians both on the same team, which was quite innovative at that point in time and drove a lot of the efficiency. I think, very similar to Max and David's stories, the goals don't really change, right? It's all part of our continuous improvement growth pattern, and quality, safety, quality of our product and our process, safety of our employees is always number one. So, when we have events, when we have a problem, we have to have a problem, right? You don't want to be the hammer looking for the nail, as Max talked earlier with VR. But you have a problem and you go to solve it, you just have a bigger toolkit. So when you get your IT and your OT teams together to solve a simple problem, it can be quite advanced now in technology, whether it's disruptive or whether it's sustaining, to bring innovation into the floor. So I think very similar to everyone else. Similar goals, always had them: safety of our employees, quality of product and process, and efficiency. But we just have a whole new tool set we can introduce into these solutions.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And Max, when you start to set out the technology choices and solutions, how do you go about selecting from that big toolkit that Peggy talked about, the right technology, and how do you make sure that that technology is aligned to the task at hand, the users and their considerations, the environment, the physical environment, and always making sure with the eye on that common set of goals?
Yeah, so I think one of the really important things for us was not overshooting what we needed. So when it comes to, in our case, VR tools, there's so much cool stuff out there. You can find $15,000 headsets that have 28K displays and all that. It's not what our engineers were asking for. So something we made sure we went to the engineers and said, what do you need from us? And what they said is, oh, we need to be able to simulate our tools. We need to be able to simulate hand access. We need to be able to look around like a real person. So we went and we tailored our purchasing and our testing to those use cases, because nobody was asking for hyper realistic, they were asking for real physics. So you got to balance what the engineers want with what the technology offers. That helped narrow it down to, we use like HTC Vives. We'll even use last gen HTC Vives because they still serve the purpose we need.
Yeah, very nice. And David, how about from a cultural and a people aspect of these solutions, right? So it's really neat that there's a ton of options out there, and these options do lend themselves to more efficiency, cost savings, employee safety is always a key metrics that we want to pay attention to. But how do you address the cultural aspects of it as you're really starting to digitally transform not only just how you do what you do, but the very nature of the company itself?
Yeah, and I think it's kind of been iterated a little bit here, but I think it starts with in our case, our field users, right? I mean, the in-person, and back to a little bit on the device part. If you don't find the right application to fit the need, right, we just kind of drive it down their throats. It's never going to evolve. They're never going to kind of take this as another tool in their toolkit, right? It gets left behind. So it was important for us to approach our field users, and because even us, it was a huge change to go from paper to a tablet, and now you're trying to go from something that they're used to working with to then this completely hands-free device. So it's important to find the right device. For us, it was important also to find the right kind of area to go into, because this market is changing very fast, right? We see new players, we see some different vendors no longer with us. So it's important to find someone that we can also build a relationship with, that we can scale up over the coming years. But the field buy-in is the vital part, right? Because just the device alone, the comfort, and in trusting that this is bringing something to their job versus trying to take something away, ultimately they're the ones driving this adoption, because we're building something for them. And so it was a pivotal point for us to make sure that they're involved specifically from the beginning, but all the way through this process.
Yeah, and so once you get that field support, then how do you take that kind of upstream, right, into the executives with KPIs and setting proper timelines? And is there kind of a common methodology that you would leverage to get executive buy-off so that the funding of these projects occurs, but more importantly, that that culture shift is supported and sponsored by senior execs?
It's kind of a double-edged sword, right? I mean, you have to have the field buy-in in order to show the value that we're going to continue on, right? Because even if you take it to the executive level and say, here we're going to sponsor this, we're going to buy X amount of headsets, right? We still have to make sure that those are being utilized and adopted. I think our biggest example is currently happening in light of COVID, right? We had a lot of success around with wearables, right? We have projects going on with virtual reality, we have some augmented reality, but really for us that really took off is the assisted reality space, which was really around RealWear, for example. And we saw the movement that was going on, but when we reached kind of March this year and COVID happened, we started to work with LibreStream, for example, and started to go with the remote support software that they have. And I think over the last 6 months, where we've seen this huge shift in the buy-in from the executive level, because we were prepared, but I don't think we actually realized how actually prepared we were, which allowed us, and I think maybe I mentioned a little bit, that we went from being in 2 countries, and now we're in almost 50 countries in a matter of 6 months of how we deployed. And so again, back to the buy-in, we have the support, we have some understanding of the value this can bring, but now we're actually able to show the value in situations like COVID, where we can't travel or you can't go into facilities, and really escalate that very, very quickly. So for us, it's been really fantastic.
Yeah, it sounds fantastic. That's really fast growth too, to go from 2 to 50 countries in 6 months. So obviously you had the support that you were looking for, and that preparation, I'm sure, lend itself to getting that support. And Lonnie, maybe we'll shift to you. And how do you offer support and assistance in the technology solution and match and helping customers drive to a reality of their dreams?
Yeah, actually, what Max said in looking for a solution, we take the approach, we're not a solution looking for a problem. We help the customer identify the problem and find the right solution. We take a design thinking approach and work collaboratively with our customers and our prospects to really find the best ROI, what kind of use cases are going to drive the highest adoption, what's going to really drive that business value. So whether it's a software stack that we currently work with very closely, or something that we need to bring to the table and do a little bit of development work with, we work closely with our prospects to drive the proper solution.
So it sounds like experience as well as collaboration really helps to kind of get the ball rolling in the right direction and make sure that it's aligned correctly to that individual entity's goals.
Without a doubt, it's interesting too, because once you identify that use case or use cases that drive the most value, whether it's a worker safety, remote mentor, workflow type of application, once you get that adoption at the field level, they start to come to you with additional use cases, additional value that this type of technology will bring to them. And quite honestly, once that adoption happens, it just somewhat explodes.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Well, good. Hey, so that's a fantastic start, and thank you all for sharing your experiences on really the inception and how to get started on these types of projects. Now let's take a page from David on that quick explosion of, once you identify the right problem statement, you get the field users on board, you get executive support. Peggy, let's start with you in terms of how do we get to the point where we're moving forward and we have the right project maturity that's going to deliver the goals that we've set out from the outset?
Yeah, that's a great question, Rob. So, and I'm impressed with the scalability that David's had and the solution he's rolled out, because we found that there's also a piece of it that comes back when it is wearable technology or hands-free that is it requires personalization, right? It's very human-centric. The technology has to be something that really partners well with the person. So the person is the most critical point here. But we've designed centers of excellence. So we've taken our top, I think we have about 8 to 10 major innovations that we're focused on. And we have a center of excellence driven by a SME in one of our plants, and everyone at the table, so that we can see. Sometimes there's multiple proof of concept going on. Sometimes there's multiple pilot going on. But when it comes time to scale that there's everyone at that table has come together collaboratively and knows it meets the requirements and that it's ready to take on that broader stance at the company. So, I think it's no different than anything else when it comes to governance and process and policy and collaboration and getting all that input. And I think the other key piece is that proof of concept, right? So everything that we do, proof of concept is weeks, right? It's very small, very, very inexpensive. Pilot then is the next stage we go to, and it's months, right? Where you build a little bit of an integration and make sure it still fits. And then the rollout can take years, right? With 53 plants to get it out there. But I think the collaboration is the key part there.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And I love the lessons learned and really the success metric and success story that you shared, because you've gone down this path, and going from that small POC to pilot to the maturation really takes time and effort and proof cases against what it sets out to be a really tightly defined criteria. So it sounds like you guys have had really good success there. Thanks for sharing that. And Max, once you got going, then, how do you get to critical mass and critical scale? And do you continue to seek approval and guidance and sponsorship from senior leadership or from the business side of the equation? Or once you get the approval, does it kind of live its own life? Talk to us a little bit about how you did that.
So basically it boils down to getting approval never ends. But to start off, it's just demos, because I've probably given demos to over 2,000 people now within the company. But each time you do that, you might catch someone who becomes that next passionate key user, and then your job's that much easier when you go to the next site. And then once you get sort of that critical mass where you're in the day-to-day work and all that, then it just comes down to, all right, if at the end of the demo I can now put a dollar value at the end of it, people get even more on board. So like, everyone hates documentation, but that's a big part of getting everything rolling. So we can take each of our reviews now, because we did the work, we know how much an engineer's hour costs, and we know how much we're saving from each review. And we can show, okay, this review saved 3x, 4x, 5x on what we just put into it. And guess what? We can do it again tomorrow and the next day and the next day without ever having to order real parts or something like that. So after a while, it starts to speak for itself, but it's also always good just to show off what you're doing, keep that notoriety, get more people interested, because the company's always hiring new people. You never know who the next key user is going to be.
Yeah, exactly right. And what a great way to end. So, David, the next question that I have is exactly kind of where Max left off is, So you're doing good work. You're gaining support. You're getting notoriety in terms of the project success. How do you make sure that everybody along the journey has the right education, has the right training, so that one, their utilization of the solution is optimized, but then also it prepares themselves for the next users, kind of as a reference?
No, it's a fantastic question. And I think we've approached it a couple of different ways. I mean, first one, I'll say it's ever evolving, right? And I think we're ever trying to learn, because as this market too, I think we're still in the early phases of what we're calling wearables, right? I mean, if you ask me, I think we've started to get the potential of the 2D more of assisted side. But as we move into like augmented and virtual, as Max said, I mean, the opportunities are endless, especially as the technology continues to evolve. But it's important for us to again, continue with our field users, making sure we're evolving, working on we don't want to just overpower them with documentation and say, hey, there's a training manual, go read we've seen how that goes, right? You start these standard work instructions, and next thing you know, they go from 5 steps to 50 steps. So, and I have to say, I mean, RealWear, for example, they've been very passionate about working with us and making sure that their teams as well help us learn, go through whatever it may be, training courses to work with our field users, or, making these, Peggy said center of excellence, right? We have, some of the same concept as well, but putting a subject matter expert that then can help train through the organization. So some of it's, passed down through lessons learned, but we try to minimize the amount of just, here's a documentation on exactly how to use the solution, and kind of let some of that drive itself.
Yeah, I love some of the commonalities, hearing all of your stories, that you follow similar processes and share similar successes to make sure that there is a success, and early on, right? I mean, these are market making solutions. It makes people think outside the box, test their creativity to match what they know about how they've always done things, and compare to say, what's the better way? What's the of the future, right? Us X as a future look like leveraging technology, right? And making sure that human assets and machine assets, plant assets, are equal to everything else that we're traditionally doing. So that's all the really good stuff. And Peggy, maybe you can help the audience understand some of the pitfalls, right? To help them make sure that, hey, don't go down that path, right? We've tested that. We can all learn from the things that you all have done that would be stories, of purgatory, to say, stay away from this particular on your journey.
Yeah, and isn't that the question of the day, Rob? Because I think all of our corporations are set up to educate our employees not to fail, right? So that's one of the biggest lessons I think all of this innovation brings into our facility is there will be failures, but from those failures, there will be lessons learned, and we'll move on to bigger and better things. A lot of those failures are shared with vendors who then want to come to the table with a better solution for what the actual problem is, right? So I think that partnership extends outside of our internal enterprise to the vendors who we're pushing, right? We're pushing them to deliver the type of solution that we need within our facility. And I think, at the end of the day, the biggest lesson we learned on the whole thing was just these things are disruptive, and when you launch them, you do have to do constant auditing, right? And these are personalized tools again. So, our first implementation, and this is back in work instructions and quality inspections, we used glass. Google and 3M, who made the shields, and our device management team, they were on the floor talking to every single employee, asking them how it felt, what they liked, what they didn't like. So I think that audit piece is critical. This is not something that just, overnight that is embraced and they move on. There's still problems we're trying to resolve, right? And I think that the only thing that we've really come back with is you have to stay plugged in. You have to stay actively talking to these employees that we're asking to do these new technologies. We've got cobots and AGVs and wearable technologies to make sure that it's meeting their requirements, and that if there's something ergonomically wrong, that we're addressing it immediately. Because ergonomics is enough to have someone put it aside and never pick it up again, right? Even if it's the greatest solution in the world, if I don't like the way it feels on my face or my wrist or my neck or my back, I'm probably not going to wear it, right? So I think just staying plugged in and learning those pieces that drove the success factor on wearability and ergonomics was critical to the success on all sides.
Yeah, the worst thing can happen is that shelfware, right?
Yeah.
And it kills all ideas,
Yeah.
which makes it really bad. And especially on OT, right? Because we really rely upon the user, not only for ideation and creation, but to make sure that they are fully invested, right? That they're all in to make sure that the solution gets to its endpoint.
Absolutely.
And Lonnie, kind of give us some sense in listening. How are the things what are the things that you do to make sure that these projects do stay on track, right? That there's lessons learned, there's pitfalls avoided, and that there's make sure that we're attaining the goals that are set out, because it takes a community to make these things happen. Talk to us a little bit about that.
Without a doubt, it takes a community. Peggy earlier talked about starting small and building to scale, and that's a core tenet in what we do. We start small. If it's going to fail fast. Learn from what happened with that failure, and continue to improve. And it's an overused term, becoming that trusted advisor with your customer, but it's true. They have to trust you. They have to trust you enough to come back, provide the feedback that is going to make the solution that much better, work through the process, and keep that line of communication open, because there really is not an endpoint. It's a continually evolving solution. The technology is continually changing, as both Dave and Max alluded to earlier. It seems like every week someone's coming out with a new feature or function, and you just have to stay on top of what's going on in the industry, on top of what the customer's needs are, and make sure you evolve with the customer, stay close contact with the customer to deliver the proper solution.
Yeah, it sounds like, based on all of your findings and your journeys and experiences, that the notion of the art of the possible really is true, right? You can leverage now all aspects of the company, right? Not only the company itself, right, in the journey, but kind of where things are going. Really, you're limited only by your imagination, because there is technology out there that can advance to whatever we're going to become in the future. So what I'd like to do at this point is, we're kind of rounding out. You guys have been absolutely terrific, and I thank you again. Is maybe just kind of go around with some closing thoughts of comments that you would make to the audience, to your peers and colleagues, about your experiences, good, bad, or indifferent, and then we'll kind of make some closing comments. But Max, how would you close out?
So what I would say to someone, especially if you're just starting out in this field or you're interested in this field and you want to push it at your company, is just be the person that does it. Whereas you can spend all day making PowerPoints, doing research, but if you can just start small, find that one project manager, that one line manager that's also really interested, find a little budget somewhere in someone's bucket that they're not watching, steal it, get started, and just go. Because once you start showing what this technology can do, it can sell itself pretty easily. But it's tough to get a lot of people on board at the beginning, especially when you're dealing with big age gaps, big technology skill gaps. So you just have to start, and once you get the ball rolling, it'll take care of itself.
Yeah, that's terrific. Thanks. Peggy, what would you offer to the audience?
I can't agree with Max more. So, the biggest question I always have, people will say, well, how did you get this past, the the expense passed up at the leadership level, they shouldn't be that big of a project to start off, right? I mean, we started our whole electronic work instruction project with $1,400 for one pair of glass, right? You have to prove it first. And the minute people see the value, it becomes their idea and they want it more than you do. So, after a certain point in time, we got to a point where every solution we had was supposed to be in glass, and then you have to realize that there's certain places it's a great tool, right? And there's certain places that it doesn't fit at all, right? It's not necessary. So I agree. And I think we have to look at some of these solutions too. And I'm interested in what David's done, because as we look at tech service and rolling things out with new solutions in the field, there's going to be a change in the expert level of our technicians, right? They don't have to be as expert if they can call back into somebody to get help, or they can see things that they may not have seen before. They had to have it all in their own mind to fix a problem. And so I think there's a dynamic that's going to shift where the technology will slowly, gradually scale in as we change the way we look at our experts and our people that are doing the jobs.
Yeah. Well, what a great comment, right? Is to make the idea become their own, yep. Right? That is such a wonderful concept, right? Is if you can transition that ownership to that audience, right? And then it does absolutely go at light speed. And David, you talked earlier about light speed and how quickly you guys went. And Peggy, like the rest of us, are interested in kind of your final closing thoughts on what final thoughts would you have for the audience to help them?
I think the final thought in theory sounds easy, but make sure that I think, again, as everyone mentioned, start small, and I think this will trickle out, but make sure that you include the end user as part of in your deployment and your scope as you define the roles. And again, it's like wildfire, right? I mean, you start with someone small, but making sure that the end user, the person that you're designing the solution for or with, is part of the process throughout since the beginning, because they're the ones that are ultimately going to drive this. They're the ones that's going to adopt this. They're the ones going to bring new value to this. And so again, it sounds simple, but I think I'm surprised from what I see is sometimes it gets overlooked and you get excited, but you automatically jump to the next step. So making sure the what we call the field user is kind of your starting point.
Your starting point. Yeah, that's good advice. Lonnie, how about you? What final words would you have?
It's really cool to see the different perspectives here, because David, Peggy, and Max, they're in this journey. They're down this road. There's a lot of customers we're talking to that are still on pencil and paper. They're on the assembly line and they're looking at a 3-ring binder and following instructions in a 3-ring binder. So what I would leave folks that are watching this with is, don't be afraid of the journey. And don't be afraid of realizing that business value, because the business value is out there. It's substantial, and it will definitely bring an immediate impact to the organization, whether it's at a small scale or deployed across 50 factories across the world.
That's fantastic. And as we go to close, folks, thank you so very much for the time you invested with us today. More importantly, the insights learned from your journeys. It is really fun to talk to people that are not afraid, that have not only gone on the journey, but have succeeded along the journey and can provide really valuable feedback and confidence for those that are thinking about going from idea to 3-ring binder to actually living the journey. So thank you very much. And now we'll open this up to a Q&A, live Q&A session. As with all Q&A sessions, we're hopeful that you have good questions and we're able to give you really good feedback. We won't be able to get to all of the questions, I'm sure, in the time that's allotted, but please make sure that you follow up with us, and we will assure that all questions will be answered in a timely fashion. So thanks, everybody, and now we'll open up to Q&A.